Hi, welcome to the video on project planning. This is my favorite because this is the very first step and also the most critical step in any project management activities. Let's take an example. When does an aircraft consumes maximum energy? It's always during the takeoff. And it's also one of the riskiest elements even in aircraft while taking off. It's very similar in project management. If you are not able to think ahead all the things about how you are going to do project management and document them in a plan, you will never be able to manage the project well. In fact, some of the authors, they say that 80% of your work is done when you have a good plan in place. Maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but it's the best way of probably making that point. So in summary, planning is such a critical activity for project management that you have to put all your energy at this point of time. Let's look at the objectives for this part of video. At the end of this video, you will be able to explain the importance of project planning, identify the uses of creating this project plan, and list and explain all the key components of an overall project plan. So let's begin with identifying the importance of project planning. I would like to take an example. Now, a plan to a project is like a route map to a journey. Suppose you go to an unknown town and you have a presentation to make at some destination. So you are starting from a point A to a point B where you are going to make a presentation. What would you do? The first thing that you do is take a pencil or pen and then try to find out the best possible route from A to B and try to find some of the in-between intermediate endpoints and then look at what kinds of modes of transportations available to you and then see how best you can start from point A and then reach point B. This is precisely what you are going to do even in real life scenario. So in planning, what we are doing is in advance, we are trying to find out what to do, when to do, how to do, and who is to do. In the previous example that we talked about, since it's a very simple one activity show from point A to point B, it becomes easier for you to do this. But in a real life scenarios, there are multiple tasks involved, multiple activities, multiple resources. So it becomes very complex. And that's the reason why you need to think all these things ahead of time. And then to do it, in many organizations, we have elaborate templates. So what are these templates? These templates would trigger or provoke you to think in the lines that we talked about. So that is what to do, when to do, how to do, who is to do, and so on. And also it will typically give you a lot of scope in terms of subsections, what kind of things that you need to elaborate upon. Next, you have to see why we are doing all this. We have a template for project management plan. We fill all these sections and so on. Why? The first thing that comes to my mind is to eliminate or reduce uncertainty. So in our example of journey from point A to point B, you are taking, let's say, bus to go from point A to point B, and anything might happen. The bus might not come on time. There might be some problems with the bus. It might stop somewhere in between. So lots of these uncertainties can happen. So you need to find out the modes of transportation available to you to switch from one to another and so on. So in general, what you are doing is improving the efficiency of the operation. The same thing that you have to do in a real life project, where you have to improve your efficiency. 3, you have a set of objectives at the end of the day to fulfill, because we started off with a set of objectives in the project management plan. So you need to have a better understanding of how you are going to achieve these objectives. Finally, when I am having a plan, I am going to the next phase of monitoring or controlling the project. I need a basis. Otherwise, how do I take charge or control or monitor this project? So that basis is what this planning helps me to do. So the next one, when we have considered why we need to do planning and what planning has been described, we have to see how this planning can be achieved, how project management plan is done. The first rule, in my opinion, is you should plan to replan, because many project managers make this blunder in project management. They create an elaborate plan in the beginning and they are very happy with it, and so the version 1.0 stays. This is of no use to a project manager, because in every project the situations change, a lot of risks happen, so sometimes even the scope changes. That's the reason the first thing that you have to keep in mind is you have to plan to replan and expect the unexpected. And that's part of how planning is done in the beginning itself. So that is something that you need to always keep in mind as a project manager. So let's look at the distinct parts of a plan, because according to me there are 2 separate or distinct sections of it. One, I call it overall plan, which I described in the beginning itself. As I said, a project manager has to think about how to achieve the set of objectives or goals that has been given to him to a closure. So for that, what all things that I need to do, it should be covered in a overall plan. And second important aspect is the part of the plan that I'm going to take it for monitoring, or is also called tracking. How do I track the project using part of this plan? So these 2 are distinct, because the first part, which is the overall plan, might consider a lot of other things which you may or may not immediately use for the next phase. But it is important from the overall project completion perspective. So an overall plan includes from project scope, objectives, customer, budget, deliverables, how, for example, you do project closure, quality, what kind of quality plan that you have, what kind of configuration management is in place, what kind of staffing plan, how are you going to ramp up the resources, are you going to have all the team members in place in the beginning of the project, are you going to hire the resources over a period of time. So that's about a staffing plan. So all these things come under, as I said, an overall plan. And when we talked about template, a template typically is something which encompasses all these things, and it's a project management plan. So the second one, as I was telling, a specific part which is going to be used for tracking or monitoring, is something which we are going to describe later about how we can do the scheduling part of it using that part of the plan. Now, the template that we are talking about, which is the overall plan, consisted of all these sections, has also one more angle to it. If you recollect the video where we talked about project management process triangle, where 3 vertices, remember, people, process and technology. This template that I've talked about as a template focuses on all these 3 aspects. So like, what are you doing with respect to the people or the staff for this project? What are you going to do about the process part of it? That's where I said configuration management plan, quality plan, or it could be purchasing, it could be customer organization, so on and so forth. Next, technology, what kind of tools that you are going to use for this project, what is the technology that is being used. See, all these angles are important when you are filling the template, because your project is not a unique or only project within an organization context. So an organization requires you as a project manager to look at all these three angles separately, because they have to use this as a repository for them to succeed in other projects also. So this becomes part of a basis for them as a historical data that is available to them for subsequently executing the projects. So let's summarize the whole topic. First, we looked at planning as the most critical step in the entire duration of the project management activity, because planning is the very first step, and also core thinking happens in this step. The second one, we looked at the project management as overall plan as well as the basis for scheduling. You have to remember that this plan is also going to be used as a standard communication tool for all our stakeholders in the later stages, because all the stakeholders need to understand what is happening in the project, and you use this as a tool to, for example, generate reports to all the stakeholders for them to feel comfortable that the project is progressing well. And last but not the least, you have to cater to these two aspects of planning in this phase itself, so that it becomes a basis for your monitoring and tracking. So let's look at the next video. We have come to the end of this video. In the next phase, we will be looking at the specific aspects as I talked about for the scheduling. Then that will be used for monitoring and control. I would like you to ponder on few thoughts before we leave this video. In the aircraft example, we looked at, this is the analogy was very similar to takeoff mode. So we have come to that stage where we are taking off. In case of aircraft, once the aircraft reaches cruise mode, the pilot can put it in autopilot mode and probably relax. But what happens in the actual project scenario? Can you do the same thing? Think about it.